Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Hi. It's really nice to see you all. Thank you for coming. And it's wonderful to be sharing with you this amazing day. The sky is clear and open, and it makes us feel good. And it's also very relevant for what we're talking about, because we're talking about kindness today, the universally necessary quality of kindness. Whether we're religious or not religious or even anti-religious, we need kindness. And kindness is also a way of being open and clear. So we have this day as a kind of teacher of something like what our hearts can be like as we cultivate kindness. We have a wonderful phrase in English. We talk about the milk of human kindness. And really, that's a very profound phrase. Maybe we grow up with it and we don't think about it very much, but it's a very profound phrase. What do we mean by that, the milk of human kindness? Well, we know very well that we humans don't survive as babies unless we get milk. No mammal survives without milk. So that suggests to us that kindness, too, the milk of human kindness, is something without which we really can't survive. And that's why it is a value and a quality and has a significance that goes beyond the borders of any particular tradition. It's also true that all of the great traditions of the world make it clear that kindness, compassion, doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, recognizing that other people's suffering feels just as bad as your own. Wow, what a thought. That's just true. If you're a Hindu or a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist, or you don't want to have anything to do with religion, it's fine, it doesn't matter. But thinking about kindness, thinking about compassion and what it means to us is something extremely important. So that's why we're gathered here, to really reflect on that and to reflect on how this can be something empowering in our own lives. One of the things about compassion that we often say is that it's actually empowering. It's a way of being able to do something. If Matthew Ricard tells this story, if you happen to know of someone or see on television somebody who's drowning in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with no one around, there's nothing you can do. You might feel horrified, you might feel desperate, but you can't do anything. He calls it pity, which you would feel at that time. Or if you encounter someone in a state of suffering and you're overwhelmed with that suffering yourself, that's empathy, but that kind of totally being overwhelmed by another's suffering is debilitating in the end. So often in the medical professions and all of the helping professions, people speak of burnout, and they speak of compassion burnout, but really, if we divide our terms this way, it's more like empathy burnout. Vibrating with other people's suffering is debilitating, but being there in your own space and having something to offer, that's empowering. In the Tibetan traditions, the bodhisattvas, the people who are totally focused on benefiting others, are called heroes and heroines. Power and ability to help and benefit others. So compassion and kindness is extremely important. It is something that brings forth an energy in us, actually. And it's also, interestingly enough, very good for us. So I want to talk briefly about two ways in which compassion, kindness, love is good for us. It's good for our health, for one thing. This is something that scientists are looking into very clearly now. You may already be familiar with work that's been done for the last several decades showing how mindfulness, some stability, ability to just sit and be, which of course is the ground of all meditative traditions, to just sit and be has enormously positive effects on the body. You may be familiar with this research. It reduces cortisol, stress levels in the body. It ups your immunity system. It lowers your blood pressure and lengthens your life. And what is being found out now that in protocols that are being developed at Stanford and Emory and Wisconsin, protocols that teach the cultivation of compassion without reference to any religious tradition, because this is so important, it needs to be universally acceptable, are finding that when on the basis of some kind of meditative stability, let's say just you watch your breath for a while, and we'll do some of this in a few minutes, all the good effects of that are increased even more when there is cultivation of compassion. The cultivation of compassion is good for the entire nervous system. It helps something called the vagus nerve, which goes from the back of the brain, the stem of the brain, down to the heart. And the health of this nerve, I just learned this at Emory University 2 weeks ago. The Dalai Lama was in conversation with many scientists there, is a huge indicator of health in a lot of ways. And it turns out that using cognitive-based cultivation of compassion, what does that mean? That means thinking about things that I just said already. Really simple truths that nobody in our culture is telling us to just sit with that. The fact that other people's suffering feels just as bad to them as yours feels to you. That's something you can think about. It's cognitive, it's knowing, it's reasonable, it's a principle. It's something that I find very convincing. You see if you can find it convincing or not. You know, all mammals cry out for help. In English we say, ouch. In Spanish they say, ay, something like that. In French they say, ay. In Tibetan they say, atata. And we all have something that we say, and these things sound rather similar when we're in pain, when we're calling out for help. Birds also call out for help. But what we consider more primitive forms of life, lizards, snakes, they don't cry for help. So that tells us that there is something developmentally progressive about human beings, about mammals, that we recognize when we need help and we ask for it. And it turns out also that offering help, or being willing to, even wanting to, is something that leads to health. It leads to the health of this nerve, called the vagus nerve, which sets in motion a whole upward spiral of physiological processes that lead to a longer life. And at Emory, they did a study on, once they started to discover this and how relieving of deep stress, a little bit of cultivation of compassion could be, they said, well, we want to bring this to the largest population possible, and we want to bring it to people who really need it, who really needs, who's living under great stress in our community. This is in Atlanta, Georgia. And someone had the brilliant idea to bring this to foster children. Foster children who have been abandoned by their parents for one reason or another live under incredible stress. And somebody reported a study, which I find extremely touching, of, usually makes me cry, so excuse me if I do. They did a study of families in London during World War II when London was bombed, and a number of children were taken to the countryside so that they could be free from the bombing. And other children stayed with their families and lived through the bombing of London, which was destroyed most of the city. It was in shambles. Hundreds of thousands of people had to be relocated after the war. And somebody had the idea to test those children. I'm not sure exactly at what point in life. And they found out, who do you think would be most stressed out? The children who lived through the bombing, or the children who went to the countryside and lived, you know, without bombing, but without their parents?
Countryside.
Would be less stressed out.
No,
Would be more stressed out. That's right. That's absolutely how it was. The bombs were less stressful overall on the systems of the children than separation from their parents. That's huge. So they took this protocol that they're developing for the cultivation of compassion to, the study is only a year or two old, so it's still in development, to these foster children. But they found in 8 weeks, doing, I think it was 20 minutes or a half hour, something like that, of the certain kinds of cultivations of kindness and compassion, they found that there were already physiological changes. Physiological changes. And what was also interesting about that was when they asked the children themselves if they thought they had changed, they didn't. They thought, nah, everything's the same, I feel the same. But they could measure physiological measurements that the children themselves were not aware of. So then they thought, well, what about this? Or is their behavior changing or not? And they developed, I thought, a brilliant way of, they had the children wear a tape recorder that would click on for something like a minute every 12 minutes. So it would track them during the day. And then they had a control group and so on. And they found that in their everyday interactions, the children who had cultivated some compassion actually were behaviorally different. They weren't recognizing it yet, but they were behaviorally different. So there's much evidence to show that the cultivation of kindness and compassion is good for you. It's good for your body. Foster children, because of the stress they live under, have a life expectancy reduction of 7 to 15 years. That's what stress will do to the body over a lifetime. So it's good for your body. So for that reason alone, we can be motivated. It is also, of course, not to say good, absolutely essential for society. We are social creatures. We don't live alone. Even the hermit, the proverbial hermit in the cave in the mountain, is being supported by and prayed for on a daily basis by his community. He is not alone. When we are alone, that's also stressful. And we can't actually survive really alone. We confronted this in the 60s. Some hippie types who wanted to, reject society. And Harvey would always say to me, yeah, but they're using electricity. You're buying food at the grocery store. Even maybe driving a car, at least a bicycle, on paved roads. Wearing clothing that did not declare you as an utter misfit in society, only a stylish misfit. Stylishly misfit. So we can't live alone. Think about that. We can't. If we take, and this is a meditation too, the next bite that you take, we have some snacks offered here after we close. Take a bite of chocolate or potato chip or a carrot. Where does that come from? Does the carrot come out of nowhere? How does that carrot get to you? What's involved? Even children understand this, right? We understand a lot's involved in a carrot. There has to be a Kroger's. There has to be a manager of Kroger's who orders the carrot. What else? There has to be a farmer. There has to be fertilizer. There have to be trucks, truckers, tires. This is not a trivial exercise. You know, it's really wonderful to slow down sometimes and consider what the constituents of our really rather wonderfully supported lives are. What makes it possible? Well, somebody invented electricity. People keep it buzzing through our system. Most of us don't understand how it works, and we rely completely on those people who do. When we're sick, this medical center is really a wonder of human science and capacity. So it really behooves us to reflect on how interdependent we are. And that web of interdependency, that nexus of connection that weaves a very delicate kind of living fabric in which we all survive and through which we are all nourished. Any harm to any piece of that harms the whole. This is absolutely clear. We can't drop a bomb in some part of the ocean and not be affected by that, never mind in other people. The Dalai Lama likes to say, and I like to repeat, that, you know, war, in the olden days when countries and societies really lived rather separately, because the interdependence among people nowadays in the 21st century is absolutely reflected by the interdependence among nations. Our economies are interconnected. Our possibility for peace is interconnected. The planet we share is affected by for everyone by anything that one nation does, which is rather frightening. So as long as, you know, maybe in the old days we had little groups of people here and there, and one group of people could lay waste to another group of people's territory, and, you know, the world would continue on pretty much in the old way it always had. But now that's not the case. When we cause havoc in one country, we, our government, or any government, which seems to be what governments are really quite skilled at doing, causing havoc in one part of the world, it never doesn't affect us. Who gave the Taliban their weapons to begin with, for example? You know, we send weapons into some part of the world because those people are going to help us fight somebody else. Get those weapons, you know? It's just real politics. So, the idea that you can really harm others without problematically affecting the support system that holds you, that's also something to think about. Now that's true on a global level. But let's come back to our community, to our families. When we are able to offer even a smile, sometimes that's a challenge too, you know, even a smile to someone in our family, to people on the bus with us, in the carpool with us, at our office, you know, it just helps. Right there, it helps. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist teacher, a Zen Buddhist teacher who teaches in France, teaches the practice of the secret smile. He says that if you, we'll do this in a little bit also, if you just, it's secret because it's not like, you know, if you just tuck up the edges of your mouth a little bit and breathe 3 times, you'll feel differently. It's very interesting. I remember that when I first heard this, maybe it was from Thich Nhat Hanh and the big teaching. I remember sitting in this big audience, and I really didn't want to be there. I just kind of made myself go, and I felt, you know, really grumpy. And I thought, well, here's another bunch of hooey, you know, but what the heck, I did it. And then about 10 minutes later, I was thinking to myself, wow, what happened? I really feel good. And it wasn't until later than that that I realized that I made the connection. And since then, now you medical people will know this better than I, but since then I've heard that, what's it called, phenomes? No, is it phenomes? Mm-hmm. That actually there's some gland or some kind of physiological thing that happens when the mouth is tipped up like that, that sends phenomes into your system. So it actually does something. So if we can offer the fruit of our own phenomes, just at that simple level to others, that's helpful. Neuroscience now talks about mirror neurons. I think we have always known about body image. We pick up we pick up from other people. Some of the scientists at Emory were also talking about a syncing mechanism, that we just kind of fall into sync with other people. They had a great visual of Tony Blair walking the streets in London, and Tony Blair walking next to Bush on his ranch. And when he walked with Bush, he walked like a cowboy. And apparently, you could absolutely see it. And when people in Britain saw Tony Blair walking like that, they just thought it was really funny. So, we kind of know. We don't really need the neuroscientists to tell us this, but if they say it, maybe it gives a more, stronger seal of, yes, this is right. Your intuition that you pick up from other people is right. There are mirror neurons, there's syncing. So what does that tell us? That tells us that when we offer some kind of positivity into our family, your pets respond, your children respond, your spouse responds, your coworkers respond. It's positive for everyone. It's positive for everyone. Even in the midst of dealing with suffering, because this would be a whole other topic, but I'm not talking about not recognizing when there's pain. Rather, talking about using all of this knowledge to further our intention to develop kindness and compassion and love in whatever way we can. To notice it in others and admire it and say, yeah, I'd like to do that. To really consciously hold it as a value and make it part of our lives. We need that. We absolutely need it. We need it for our personal health. We need it for our society. We need it for our personal health, our family, our coworkers, country, our world. We need it. This is absolutely essential for our individual and collective survival. To hold it as a value cognitively is an important step in developing it emotionally. We have this idea in the West, I don't think we actually have it in our personal lives, but we're taught in school, and it filters through our culture, that thinking and reasoning and feeling are two completely different things. But the fact is, and now we have neuroscience again, Richie Davidson of the University of Wisconsin, telling us that there are actually no neurons in the brain that are only for feeling. Cognitive networks are all over the brain. So as we think about the importance of compassion, the logic of compassion makes sense. Your suffering is as bad for you as mine is for me. How can I deny that? So then, how can I feel that only my suffering matters? I want to think about that because, in a lot of ways I behave as if it's only my suffering that matters. But now I'm ready to look at that. I'm ready to look at that, and in that way, move toward a more open-hearted, as we said in the beginning, and clearly understood sense of how I am and what really is. So it would be good to see what that feels like too. See if we can cultivate a little of this. Would you like to do that together? So, you've been sitting for half an hour already. You want to shake up, stretch. Because kindness starts with yourself, actually. And that's a huge lesson. And be kind to yourself, then you'll be able to be kinder to others. Sometimes we think of compassion as something where we have to forget ourselves or sacrifice ourselves, but actually that won't work in the long run. Okay, so get comfortable, and within being comfortable, let the trunk of your body be as straight as it can be, not stiff. We're being kind to ourselves. Not stiff, but, kind of flowingly erect. Why? Because that's going to give you more space inside. And it's going to let your energy move more freely. And you're going to feel better, and you're going to feel stronger.